Well, this is Good Friday, and all over the world, people are looking at Jesus. Even people who normally wouldn't give him a second look, they're considering him. There's movies on television, there's services all over the world, and people are considering who Jesus is. And all week we've been offering you this book, Who is Jesus, by the author and pastor Greg Gilbert. And today he joins us in studio. First of all, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, you came from Louisville, Kentucky.
Came from Louisville, Kentucky.
But you don't speak like a Kentuckian? Or
no, I don't. I actually grew up in Texas, in East Texas, very small town in East Texas. Spent some time in Connecticut going to college, and then Washington, D.C., then Louisville. I've been in Louisville for 12 years now.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, the old Texas and Kentucky accent is just not there anymore.
Okay, so now you're in Canada. Is this your first time in Canada?
Not the first time in Canada. Been there several times.
Well, welcome here, and we're so
you.
glad, not just that you're here, man, but that you wrote this book.
Oh, thank you.
You know, who is Jesus? And what an important question, especially at this time of the year. And I love the way that you come at the book. It's not like overly theological. It's very practical. You even call it a little book, but I mean, sometimes they say good things come in small packages, and this is just dynamite because I love your approach. You just come at it almost with an innocence. Hey, let's ask the question, who is Jesus? You know, here's this guy who lived over 2,000 years ago. And a question I want to ask you is a question you ask is, why should people care about who Jesus was?
A hugely important question. One of the reasons that I think people should care is just that, just at the most basic level, you can't understand who we are as a Western society, as a global society, really, without understanding who Jesus is, because he's such a monumental figure in the history of the world. So there's one historian, famed historian, who said that if you were able to come up with a kind of super magnet to pull out every little shred of evidence from Jesus or every little shred of his influence in Western civilization and global history, there wouldn't be much of it left. I mean, Jesus is just a massive figure. So you can't understand yourself really without understanding Jesus. But way more important than even that, from just a historical kind of perspective, is the fact that when you understand who Jesus is and who Jesus claimed to be, you start to understand that Jesus was making claims in his teaching, in his proclamations of who he was, not just about himself, but about you and about me. So when he says, I am the Son of God, I am the Son of Man, I'm the one who's come to save sinners from their sins, and you are one of those sinners, well, that becomes something that's very personal, that's very much in my stuff, and so I better pay attention to that. Now you may come to the conclusion that, you know, I don't believe Jesus, I don't believe that he is who he says he is, I don't believe what he's saying about me, about God. You may say, I don't believe all that. But if somebody's saying things like that, doesn't it make sense that you wouldn't just say, well, I don't care, I'm not going to give it any attention, I'm not going to think about it? Doesn't it make more sense that you would say, I'm going to look at that and I'm going to decide whether I believe it or not? Yeah,
you know, it's great what you're saying. You may not believe what he said, but we can't deny the fact that he actually existed. It's you have to decide what you want to do with what he said.
Yeah, that's right.
And another thing you address in the book, which again, I read it the other day and I was like, man, this is so great. This is simple. It's great to give somebody who's a new believer or somebody who's been around the block for a while, but just to kind of just re-question yourself, why do I believe what I do? And I love the question you ask is, who did Jesus say he was? You know, we know who we say he is, but what did he actually say about himself?
Yeah, great question. I love the way you put it. This book is written primarily for people who don't know much about Jesus at all. So it starts out with kind of no presuppositions. How would Jesus have struck you if you were just walking around in the Judean countryside and you get word that there's this teacher healer who's out on the mountain and you say, okay, I've got an afternoon, I'm going to go hear what this guy says. How would he have struck you?
See, even the way you say that, it just puts it in perspective. We spiritualize the Bible so often, but it's just normal people. They heard about this guy, let's go check him out.
Yeah, that's right. And they would have heard him give ethical teaching. They would have heard him teach about the Bible. But then they would have heard him say things like, I and the Father are one.
Yeah, whoa.
And if you pay attention to that, you're thinking, wait a second, this is not a guy who just thinks of himself as an ethical teacher. He's claiming something extraordinary here, and then you would have had to make up your mind whether it's really true that Jesus and the Father, that by which they meant God, is he one with God, and what does that mean?
Yeah.
So So, you know, I think to what you were saying, people often, even Christians, tend to put Jesus in a little spiritual box and put him on the religious shelf.
Yeah, yeah.
And we pull him down. But what I'm trying to do in the book is say, actually, no, Jesus doesn't fit in that religious category. He was a man who was making this extraordinary claim that he himself was the culmination of this whole epic story of creation.
Yeah.
And it's all come to a head in me, is what he was saying.
That's right.
And
That's
it's
huge.
incredible.
Yeah.
So I think for Christians even to be able to take Jesus out of the box, click him back into the whole epic story, it helps Christians get to know him better when we start to do that and don't just kind of divide his life up into these little episodes, you know, of interesting things, but put it all in the story and see this incredible thing that Jesus was actually doing and claiming.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that we talked about before we came on camera was understanding Jesus in his culture. You know, you're from Louisville, I'm from Toronto, and we're both Westerners, and we come to the gospel and to the scriptures with that perspective sometimes, and we miss the color that the Jewish Hebraic background puts into the gospel. Right. How important do you think it is for us as Christians here in the West to really appreciate, you know, the flavor of the Jewish background?
Yeah, well, it's important because all of the claims Jesus was making were, what he was doing when he was making these claims to be king, to be the Son of God, to be the Son of Man, all of those different things that he was saying, each one of them was kind of the detonation of a bomb that had been set all the way back in Genesis.
Right.
You know, so you just take one, for example, you take Jesus' claim to be the Davidic king.
Okay.
Well, now that's interesting, but it doesn't really communicate very well in our modern Western.
With us.
No, who cares if there's a king? Who cares? You know, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
For the Israelites, however, if you were a first century Jew and you heard this man claiming that he was going to sit on the Davidic throne, this was huge.
Yeah, then
because the Davidic throne is sort of the iconic symbol of the entire nation of Israel and everything that God had been doing on it. And to make matters even more amazing, the Davidic throne had been empty, no one sitting on it, for 600 years.
Yeah.
So the last king of Israel, the last Davidic king of Israel, had been carried off to slavery in Babylon with a hook through his nose and a chain leading up to the general's horse, and he was carried off to Babylon, and he became a sort of slave to the king of Babylon. As far as anybody knew, that was the end of the Davidic throne.
Yeah, it was over.
And now this man comes in saying, I'm going to sit on that throne again. This whole thing is going to rise. And not only am I going to sit on the throne of Israel, but God has decided to take that throne and universalize it and set it over the entire world.
Yeah, now which
is why the Bible refers to Jesus not just as King of Israel, but King of Kings.
That's right, man.
So you see, you're getting, when you understand what all this means, it just becomes epic. And your understanding of who Jesus is goes from interesting religious figure, Son of God, to, oh my goodness, he's the King of the world.
Wow. Well, that sets it up beautifully for my next question is, you know, there's been so many great leaders and religious icons throughout the millennia, but what makes Jesus different? Like, what sets him apart from other religious leaders, in your opinion, man?
Yeah. Well, as I look at the story of Jesus, the thing that sets him apart most is that he's making claims that are not just ethical and not just religious, but it's more the story of a king re-invading a rebellious country that used to be his, and then against all expectations. Because what does a king do when he re-invades a rebellious country? He kills the rebels.
Okay.
You know, that's what they deserve.
Right.
It's right of him as king to do that. But against all expectation, this king re-invades his rebellious land, so to speak, the rebellious world, and says, I'm going to offer you rebels mercy. So the whole thing is based on his person, not just his teaching, not just some ethics or philosophy that he teaches, which is usually the case with most religions in the world. This whole thing is based on him and what he does and who he is. And then, of course, when you get right down to it, the whole weight of Christianity rests on the question, well, did Jesus actually get up from the dead?
That was my next question.
If he did, then the whole thing comes together like clockwork. All of this is true, and Jesus is who he says he is.
Yeah, I mean, the resurrection is what everything hinges on, our hope, you know, and Paul says, if the resurrection, if Christ did not rise from the dead, then our faith is in vain. Yeah, what are we doing? And so my question is, people say, oh, early Christians made up the resurrection story, you know, but if they continue to tell people that Jesus rose from the dead, the punishment was death. So why commit to a lie unless it were true?
That's right.
Right?
You're not gonna die for a lie. You're not gonna die for a hoax. And, and the people who were out proclaiming that Jesus had gotten up from the dead, first of all, it's not as if they were gullible people. They were skeptical. They were scared. They didn't know what to think. On the day that Jesus died, they all, I mean, you read the story in the Bible, they all scatter because they're afraid that the Romans, just as they had done in the past, were not just going to take down the leader, but you're going to take down
followers,
the followers as well, especially the ones who are right next to the leader. So they're scared to death. They're not gullible. And it takes them some time, actually, to come to the conclusion that Jesus is risen from the dead. Now, if they didn't really believe that that happened, if they were just perpetrating a hoax or, you know, whatever, when the sword is about to come down on your neck, you say, hold up, this plan, whatever plan I had to make a name for myself or to get rich or become powerful, clearly has not worked, so let's start over. The only reason you let that sword come down on your neck or you let them, you know, nail you to a cross, as tradition said about Peter, is if you really think this happened.
Yeah, if you really, really
this
believe it. This
really happened, and now I'm willing to give my life for it. So yeah, it's an amazing story of really skeptics and cowards becoming proclaimers and martyrs because something happened that changed them. And it was the resurrection of Jesus.
That's so powerful. Listen, man, we only have a few moments left, and I want to ask you one more question. So after all this, we're focusing on Good Friday and the crucifixion and the resurrection that's coming. At bottom line, who is Jesus?
Who is Jesus?
To you.
Yeah, that is the question, isn't it? To me, Jesus is the man, and he is a man. He's not merely man, but he's the man who saved me and is saving me from my rebellion against God.
I like that. It's ongoing.
I'm a rebel against God. I understand that. But Jesus is the man who lived the life that I should have lived from the very beginning, as my substitute, standing in my place so that I don't have to face the wrath of God for myself. He faces it for me. So he lives the life that I should have lived from the very beginning. He dies the death that my rebellion against God deserved in the first place.
That's right.
And then he rises from the dead, and because I embrace him by faith, which just means reliance, it means trust. Because I embrace him by faith, I'm going to rise right along with him. I'm going to have new life because he has new life. Isn't that incredible?
It is, and I can totally tell you're a pastor. You know, I can just hear that pastor's heart coming out of you. And I'm so thankful that you wrote this book, that you were obedient to the call. Writing isn't easy. You know, everybody likes seeing, you know, books on the shelf in the store, but it takes a lot of work. And
it does.
We appreciate so much the work that you put into this book. And we're making this available to you this special, you know, Easter week. And for your best ministry gift, we want to put this in your hands. And if you're asking that question, who is Jesus? This is the book that's really going to help you along your journey.